Welcome to Off the Clock, the webcast of employment attorneys at Miller Johnson, where we discuss what is happening in the HR world and provide practical insight and advice. We are your co-hosts, Rebecca Strauss and Sarah Willey, two employment lawyers who spend their days guiding employers through all of the challenges that workplaces offer.
Hi, Sarah. How are you?
I'm great, Rebecca. How are you doing?
I am good. You know, we had some in-person events recently, which were really fun. And one of the most fun parts of it is we got to meet people who I had not met before personally,
Right.
but who said they felt like they knew me because they'd been watching this and wanted to come up and just meet me. And I thought, is this what it's like to be Oprah?
Well, it's as close as we will get, I think. Yes, to knowing what it's like. Yes, you're a celebrity in a very small circle.
Yes.
You're an employment lawyer in West Michigan celebrity.
I'll take it.
Yeah, star status.
That's as close as I'm ever going to get.
That's awesome.
So in all seriousness, it was great to see people
Right.
back in person, even with masks on, and really appreciate the support people have given to this podcast, webcast, however people are watching it.
Absolutely.
It's been 6 months.
6 months. Wow, it's been fun.
Yes, and at the beginning we couldn't be in the same room, right? We had to be separated.
Oh, that's right. We were on camera for the first one. Remember that? And separate.
Yeah, and then the couch.
Offices. And then we moved to the couch, and now we're on our third set in 6 months.
We're breaking all the budgets.
Right,
We're breaking all the budgets. So
right.
What else hasn't changed? Well, our sets have changed, but what hasn't changed in the last 6 months? There's still this labor shortage, right,
Oh, my
Sarah?
goodness. Yes.
I don't think it was 6 months ago, but it was a while ago when we were on the couch.
I remember that. Yes.
And we did an episode about finding more employees, right? Or maybe a better way to put it is disqualifying less applicants, right? Because of the labor
Right.
crunch.
Yep.
And we talked about primarily marijuana, right? And whether employers would consider
Sure.
removing marijuana as a disqualifier, right, for employment. So here we are now, maybe 5 months later, and have your clients seen any loosening up in the labor market?
Gosh, no relief at all, to be honest. Much to everyone's surprise, I would say, because there was maybe speculation that once the enhanced unemployment benefits ended, people would come back to work, or once kids were able to go back to in-person school, we would see an influx of people returning to the workforce. And unfortunately, that hasn't happened.
Yeah.
That hasn't happened. Why, Rebecca? Why?
Well,
Tell us why, will you?
I'm just an employment lawyer in West Michigan, a celebrity employment lawyer.
Nonetheless.
But still, I mean, we have to remember, right, who we are. But I can tell you what I've been reading about and hearing about.
Okay.
All the explanations, because I've been reading and listening to different economists talk about this. There's not one single reason anyone
Sure.
is landing on,
Right.
And almost all of the reasons are pandemic or pandemic financial assistance related.
What do you mean by that?
So let's just talk about the pandemic itself. There's a childcare, everyone has a shortage of employees, including childcare providers. So families with young children are having trouble finding childcare providers or
Okay.
open slots in daycare centers, et cetera. And folks, even with children in school, are a little hesitant yet, either to send their child back to school because of COVID, or maybe the unpredictability, right, of whether a school might have to send their child home, either the whole school or just their child or just their
Right.
child's class, right, for 2 weeks on and off. That stress of working and with unpredictable, all of a sudden I can't, and you and I have
Right.
both been there, of course, in our lives, that's a very stressful situation. And not everyone is ready to jump back into the workforce and deal with that, or they just can't because the child care is unavailable.
Interesting. So even though schools are back, people might either have younger kids for whom they can't get reliable child care, or maybe there's this anticipated fear or concern that their kid's going to get sent home to quarantine, or the teacher's going to get sick, and suddenly they're going to be home for 2 weeks with the kid. And remember, young kids can't be vaccinated yet, right? And
Correct.
so there's a higher likelihood that if a child is exposed to COVID, then they're home for the 14-day quarantine period. That's interesting.
Yep. Also, a lot of people just left the workforce because they decided to retire early.
Yeah, I've saw a lot of that.
I just heard an economist yesterday talking about that, but I also know a few financial advisors, and they both they've been going gangbusters, frankly. Very, very busy over the last year and a half, and one of the reasons is lots of folks choosing to retire.
Okay.
Before they thought they were going to. And there's lots of individual reasons, but generally stock markets, done very well. So people's retirement savings accounts are higher. So if they had a magic number they were trying to reach, they got to that magic number a little earlier than they thought they might have. Also, they just realized they didn't actually enjoy working. And I'm not saying that applies to any of our listeners or you or I, but some people, when they got sent home and didn't work for 2 months, thought, I could live like this. And then thought, what am I waiting for? Well, I had this magic number. Well, why was that my magic number? Maybe I just changed a few assumptions, right? Because as we all know, the magic retirement number is based on lots of assumptions. This is not a financial planning podcast, but people adjusted their expectations as how much they need to live on every year in retirement, or it changed a few assumptions in terms of return on investments, et cetera, et cetera. But there's no question, and I'm sure we all know folks, right, that retired a little earlier than they thought they might have.
One thing I've noticed too, particularly related to certain industries like hospitality, for example, who might traditionally hire younger college-aged folks. Both of us have kids in that age. And one thing I've noticed with those kids is they are very attracted to those gig worker jobs.
Right.
Driving for Grubhub and doing that kind of work, and not as interested in taking those jobs, waiting tables, working at bars, maybe even working for a childcare organization. And so I've just sort of observed that too, and thought to myself, I wonder how those restaurants and other businesses might be able to better attract those college-age kids who, quite frankly, have a pretty good thing going, being a Grubhub driver on their own schedule, right?
That's pretty hard to recruit against.
I know.
Just work when you want.
Yeah.
Show up when you want. Take a shift when you want. Don't when you don't want to. I mean, I obviously restaurants can't. The hospitality industries, retail can compete with that. I completely agree with that observation.
Yeah.
Let's not forget too. There's still a lot of people who are nervous about COVID.
Yeah.
And people can discuss all they like whether that's rational or not, but it's true to them. And it's causing a barrier, right, to them getting back. If they have the resources, if they have the financial resources to not have to jump back into the labor market. There are people that are high risk themselves, that live with high risk individuals, that have children that aren't vaccinated, who are still quite concerned.
Yeah.
And that is still presenting a barrier to reemployment.
So in other words, it's not one reason in particular. It's probably a whole lot of different reasons. You mentioned pandemic assistance. What did you mean by that?
Well, a lot of folks, some of it wasn't exactly titled pandemic assistance, but if you remember, the Biden administration issued checks, right? Direct deposits to most people in America.
Right.
And then there was the unemployment too. And this is just anecdotal now, but I've heard a few stories on a radio program recently, for instance, where someone said she saved all of that and is now not working.
Right, okay.
Because she had other savings too. And she will work, by the way. Lots of people, at least this reporter talked to, said they are planning at some point on getting back into the workforce.
Okay.
But they got enough money from wherever, right, that they don't feel the pressure to do it right now, and they're going to wait.
Okay.
And maybe change a career, do something they really want to do. Lots of people, by the way, aren't just staying home. They're changing careers, right? Mm-hmm. They're taking the opportunity. And there's a lag in employment when that happens. And people have the financial cushion now to absorb that lag.
All right. So optimistically thinking, there may be a chunk of people who still will return to the workforce in some way, and maybe we will see the influx that we were hoping to see earlier in the fall to some degree.
It's always dangerous to say something when you're being recorded. Especially as a lawyer, which is why whenever you see people on the morning talk shows, they always say, my lawyer advised me not to answer.
Yes. What are we supposed to say?
So I'm not going to, instead of a prediction, I'm going to frame it in terms of a hope.
Right. Okay, fair enough.
I hope that a year from now, we can get back together and we will say there are more employees in the workforce, and that this labor shortage has eased up to a significant degree. But it's not going to be today, and it's not going to be next week.
Right.
And it's probably not going to be by January 1st. Right?
Yeah. So given that, what sort of workplace issues are you seeing related to that challenging labor market?
Well, the primary one is in your wheelhouse.
Yeah.
But let me just
I know what you're going to say.
Let's just talk about why. And then one is in my wheelhouse too.
Right.
But let's think about just a moment of all of our employers and HR folks that are listening or watch us. They know there's a labor shortage, right? They didn't have to hear us talk about it. They're recruiting like crazy, right? They're considering signing bonuses and retention bonuses, and they're trying to fill those seats. They're working hard to fill those seats, but it will take time. So we've got this period of time we're living in now, that our clients are living in now, where they don't have enough people to do the work, right? They've got 10%, 15%, 20% open positions,
right?
But the clients still have to be taken care of, the widgets still have to be made, right, et cetera, et cetera. And so I haven't heard a lot of discussion, Sarah, about people helping the HR community through that. How do you manage? What are the legal obstacles, right? What are we seeing in terms of trying to get the same job done with less employees available to do it? And so one of the first things that always comes up, of course, right, is FMLA ADA issues, because some employees do not want to work more, right?
Sure. Yeah.
And so some of these requests obviously are legitimate, right? They can't work as much as an employer may need them to work to get the job done, and others are simply tired. What are you seeing with your clients? Oh,
absolutely. So no question. Whenever we see a peak in the number of hours that employees are required to work for a business, right? Almost always correlated with that will be intermittent FMLA requests, right?
Intermittent, everyone's favorite.
Yes, exactly.
The best kind of FMLA.
Yeah, and I will say more intermittent than continuous leave, right? And that's largely related to working a lot can lead to legitimate physical and mental health impairments, right? For which an employee may truly need intermittent FMLA. And then also some employees, if their back is against the wall in the only way they can possibly get a Sunday off work after having worked 7 days a week for the last 6 months, if they see the only way that can happen for them is to get certified for intermittent FMLA leave, that's what they might do, to be honest, right? And so we see a huge influx of intermittent FMLA usage, which then of course creates this cycle of then you have people calling in unplanned, and then you have to pull Rebecca off her 1 day off work and tell her now she has to work for Sarah, who called in, and that causes significant morale issues. I unfortunately do not have an easy solution to that. The FMLA still exists, right? And if somebody has a legitimate need and can get a doctor to certify it, then they do have that right to take intermittent FMLA. I think that is becoming more and more a conversation that is had between human resources and the operations folks, whoever they be, right? Whether it's a healthcare or organization, whether it's manufacturing, et cetera, to talk about trying to logistically schedule employees in a way that gives them some semblance of normalcy and control.
Yeah.
Okay. When employees feel like they don't have any control over their work schedule, and they're mandated to work all the time,
Interesting.
they will tend to take time off work however they need to take time off work, right? So, and I think you mentioned that a little at the beginning, which is setting aside the legal piece. Are there logistical solutions here that may help those morale concerns, right? Yeah. Can we better predict when Rebecca works, and if it's critically important for Rebecca to have Wednesday evenings off so she can play in a softball league, right? And that's going to help her come to work all of the other days. We might need to be recognizing those things and trying to make those things happen, even if that's not typically something we might have done or assumed that we can't possibly schedule around somebody's softball league. Does that all make sense?
That does make sense. I never thought about it quite that way. And I feel like if there are any employees listening
right.
to us right now, they'll really appreciate that.
Right.
That thought. But so what you're saying is by being proactive,
sure,
employees may not actually need FMLA, intermittent FMLA, or may not feel the need to request it.
To the extent that some of those employees are utilizing that more as a way to control their schedule and take time off work when they need to, I think that's true. Obviously, if somebody has a health impairment and they just truly have flare-ups and there's nothing we can do to control it, then that's a different situation. But to the first, I'm seeing a lot of that. And yes, again, the control, the sense of an employee needing to control in some way, whatever we can give them to help control their work schedule, it's going to be more likely that they stay with you and that they show up to work when they're supposed to.
That they stay with you, because we are, as we
both
started,
of those
that's in a
things,
labor shortage, right? We do not just have to recruit, but we actually have to keep the people that we have.
Exactly.
Right? And if we make them so miserable
right,
that they leave, then that's not helping anyone. Now you're in an even worse position, right? So whenever you talk about the FMLA, I always feel like we need to include two PSAs. One is no retaliation. Right? And that's especially important now when everyone is just very stressed, let's be honest. Managers, supervisors, et cetera, they're under tremendous pressure right now. And it's important for HR to help them understand.
And coworkers too. I'm actually seeing more reaction, understandably, from coworkers than supervisors and managers. Supervisors and managers, for the most part, at least understand when to keep their mouth shut, right?
Well, you would think.
Right, exactly. Of course, then we wouldn't have a job. But coworkers have a heightened reaction when somebody is taking intermittent FMLA leave. Again, understandably so. It's my one day off work, right? I had planned to do something for myself, and now I have to go into work because Sarah called in.
And when that employee complains to the supervisor and says, I want to know why Sarah Willey called in on a Sunday because I think she's off playing softball.
Sure.
How is the supervisor supposed to respond to those types of questions? Right.
Well, obviously, you can't disclose a specific health condition or situation. If Sarah hasn't made known that she's using FMLA leave, probably not a good idea to call that out specifically. But I think you can say that the organization doesn't allow employees to just call in for no reason, and they need to trust that if that's occurring, that employee does have a legitimate need to miss work on that day. But again, I would circle back then with focusing on that complaining employee and try to have a conversation with them about how we might help them feel better, feel more in control, right? What can we do for them? Man, they have all the leverage right now. This is, right?
Yeah.
It's a buyer's market, right?
It's a buyer's market, absolutely.
This is
wages, hours, et cetera.
Exactly.
And that's
everything.
really...
So speaking of wages and hours, let's talk about
I didn't even plan that.
this labor market and how it relates to your favorite area of the law.
Right.
And that's wage and hour, Fair Labor Standards Act. I'm seeing quite a few issues come up
Yes.
in that area too. People working multiple jobs, getting paid different rates, exempt employees doing non-exempt work, etc.
So first of all, let me just say, my world is topsy-turvy right now because I'm getting questions from clients. They start off saying, I need to talk to you about an exemption question, and it's about the vaccine. I've had that happen twice this
all
week.
the questions are about the vaccine.
But that is 2 times a conversation opened that way.
Right.
I need to talk to you about an exemption question. I get all excited. I finally, right, back in my wheelhouse, and it's a religious exemption to the vaccine. So it's fun to talk about exemptions in the context of the Fair Labor Standards Act. So in terms of employers doing more with less people, we're seeing employers asking employees to pick up shifts doing things that may not be their typical job. Right? We're seeing that whatever you
all
can do.
All across the board.
All across, in every type of industry. Not just extra hours. We're not going to spend a lot of time on that because we all know if someone's working over 40, if they're not exempt, to pay them overtime, et cetera. But what we're seeing is maybe exempt employees picking up shifts doing non-exempt work, right?
Or just jumping in. Right? They come to work today, and Sarah called in, and somebody has to do my hourly job.
Yep.
Right?
And so that question comes up fairly often. And so just remember that a person cannot, an employee is either classified as exempt or not.
Okay.
And that's it. And then we look at their primary job duties. So we can't classify them as exempt Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, and then non-exempt, right, for shifts on the weekend doing, working on the floor, for instance, in manufacturing. It doesn't work that way. That person would still be considered an exempt employee because an employee, it's not the shift that's exempt or not, it's the person that is exempt from the overtime requirements of the Fair Labor Standards Act or not. So when someone is doing more than one type of job, we look at the primary duty, right? What is their real job? Why are they hired? What do they spend the most time doing? Et cetera, et cetera.
It's probably going to be the exempt job.
For most exempt employees that are still filling 40 to 50 hours a week, right, doing their exempt work and then doing some non-exempt work in addition, they're still probably going to be exempt.
So then I know what lots of our listeners are wondering right now, right? Okay. Which is, okay, but I want to reward that exempt employee for doing that extra work, right? So they can do that, right? They can, even though that person is exempt, they could pay them extra for picking up the weekend shifts.
Absolutely. There's a regulation right on point, and you can do it at just a flat bonus, $500, right? Anytime you work a weekend or pick up a shift you're not supposed to work. You can even pay the extra compensation on an hourly basis, which blows people's minds. It's completely fine. The only problem is it gets confusing, right? Because even when I just said that, people that aren't familiar with that are like, wait, hold on a second. So then I'm paying them hourly, but you just said they're still exempt, right? And so the employees often will have the same
it's a reward.
Confusion.
It's a bonus, right?
But you can say for extra work, if you pick up line work, for instance, shift work right after your exempt duties, we'll give you $20 an hour, right? You can do that. And the question that comes up whenever I talk to clients about that is, and it's not subject to overtime, right? Because they're still exempt. They're still exempt from the Fair Labor Standards Act overtime requirements. But sometimes a lump sum type of bonus, a stipend, something like that, is less confusing to exempt employees.
Got it. And then, of course, setting it up in the payroll is a whole different issue. I have some clients struggling to figure that out.
Yeah. Right. I have sometimes talked directly with payroll companies. Those of us that work in this area,
explain it.
Miller Johnson,
Yeah.
sometimes do. Some payroll companies are more sophisticated than others. And this is what I call advanced Fair Labor Standards Act, right? Payroll companies usually have, not always, but usually have the basic Fair Labor Standards Act down pat. But when we get into these advanced issues, sometimes they just need some help understanding it. But programmers, I don't understand computer programming. All I know is that they can figure this out. Right. Okay. You don't have to be doing the math back in HR.
What else in the wage and hour front are you seeing related to extra work, the labor market, et cetera?
Well, two issues. One is just hourly employees are working more hours. And so this isn't a question I've been getting, but it is a reminder, right, to make sure that everyone is getting paid their overtime if they're working over 40 hours a week. It is more expensive to pay people overtime than to pay people straight time to get widgets made, right? Yep. It just is. And so your operations folks and C-suite folks just have to understand the increase in the labor cost, but not paying people. The overtime is not a solution, right? The other issue is a little different than doing more with less. It has to do with retention bonuses and other kinds of bonuses that would be kind of fun to talk about a little bit here too, right?
Oh, I love that topic, retention bonuses, because I feel like I'm hearing a lot of discussion and commentary in general on the recruiting front.
Yes.
Right? How do I find? Yes. How do I find and recruit and hire more people to fill this gap?
Yeah.
And I fear that some employers are laser focused on that and forgetting to also look at how to retain the people they have. Right? So I'm hearing a lot of sign-on bonuses. I love to hear you say retention bonuses because I kind of feel like they go hand in hand, don't you?
I don't think a lot of people see it that way. We're going to start a movement. You and I. Right. When someone in your organization says sign-on bonus, you say retention bonus, right?
Right.
They go together like peanut butter and jelly, in my opinion. It's not an either or, but just think about it logically. If you're having sign-on bonuses, and lots of organizations are starting to offer sign-on bonuses, as we know. First of all, your folks that have been there a while might feel resentment towards the new employees who come in making the same wage plus got this nice sign-on bonus, and they're sitting there saying, what am I, chopped liver, right? I've been doing all this work for you all along. That's not fair. But also keep in mind that they can go across the street, your current employees, and get a sign-on bonus. And if they stay for you, they don't. So in terms of retention, that's why it's called a retention bonus, right? If everyone's offering sign-on bonuses, including you, you should also consider retention bonuses, which means that people get a bonus if they stay a certain amount of days, weeks, months, years, right? You can pay that out really however you like. There's not a lot of legal trouble, hiccups, details that you have to worry about, except for this one wage an hour one. And I brought this up at our fall client seminar, and Sean Egan actually mentioned it without detail. He didn't throw the detail on because he appeared at our fall client seminar. He's with the state's Department of Labor. And he mentioned one of the most common mistakes and investigations that they conduct, maybe I should say the most common complaints they get from employees and then have to investigate, is deductions from final paychecks.
Right.
And so to put a spin on that, just remember, lots of folks, when they do retention bonuses or sign-on bonuses.
I was going to say, sign-on bonuses
have a payback requirement.
Sure.
Right? So if you leave before a certain date, right, you have to repay us either in whole or prorated. And then employers will deduct that from the final paycheck. There is a state law in Michigan, right?
And in many other states too,
employed, where you cannot deduct anything from a final paycheck with a few exceptions. But most things cannot be deducted from a final paycheck without an employee's authorization, right? So when you have these sign-on or retention bonus programs, you should have a sign-off, right, from the employee or the recruit, and it should include authorization for you to deduct from the final paycheck. That is a big mess that a lot of employers.
Yes, exactly. Make sure that agreement is written well and carefully. And quite frankly, it can be a 1-page bonus agreement. This does not have to be a 20-page detailed contract, but you can have it in 1 page, but you certainly want to be able to deduct what you can from that last paycheck. Also, just check my thinking here. If you make the deduction, that employee still has to make at least minimum wage if they're non-exempt, right?
Yes, very good point. They can't, if they worked a 40-hour week, let's say their last week, and then you deduct the retention bonus that they're no longer going to get, or maybe the sign-on bonus that they have to return, they can't make $5 for the week, right? So you may take a hit. You may have to eat some of it at the end of this. So
unfortunately,
just is what it is.
I'm seeing a fair amount of people taking jobs to get that sign-on bonus and then leaving, skirting out fairly quickly.
It's kind of like Halloween and trick-or-treating for adults. Just go up and down 28th Avenue or West Edge.
Unfortunately, yes.
With your...
Now, let me be clear, right? We're talking about a very small percentage of the population who have figured that out and are taking advantage of it. But there is some of that. Yeah. So have a robust agreement in place. And as I said, as our HR folks are having conversations about hiring, which they all are, and out-of-the-box ideas and solutions for where we can find people and convince them to join us, those conversations really should also be going hand in hand with retaining the people you have. Otherwise, you end up bringing folks in and then people are leaving almost as quickly as you're bringing folks in. So those really do go together.
Because other companies, your competitors, are recruiting your employees right now.
Correct.
As you're listening to this
Just
podcast,
like they're recruiting their competitors.
Just like you're recruiting from other... People are recruiting your employees right now, so think about that. Your employee is going to get a call. A lot of your employees will get a call, an email, whatever, today. Right. And what will make them feel valued and want to stay? And what if the recruiter says, and we're offering the sign-on bonus? You need to be able to overcome that.
Yeah, excellent. Absolutely. Well, it's a challenge. It's a challenge for many, many businesses, but we'll get through it. And I like your optimism.
I think I'm hoping a year from now we'll be talking about something else.
Excellent. Excellent. All right. Well, it's always great to chat with you, Rebecca, and
you too.
Have a wonderful day.
Thanks, you too. Bye, Sarah.
Bye.